Deja vu all over again. I started out the morning here about 5 o'clock, and now it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it seems like I've been here all day. We've got a packed program this afternoon. Of course, joining us in a few minutes, Dan Gainor with newsbusters.org, and following that, conversation with Matt Dodge of now Market Street Wealth Management, and Mary Griswold, right-wing granny. I'm looking forward to hearing that interview I did earlier today. It was so early that I'm barely remembering some of the comments, but it was interesting. We were chatting this morning for this afternoon's program that has been pre-recorded, Mary Griswold of Right-Wing Granny, about the investigation of the Clintons, and particularly the recent discovery and disclosure of witness reports and as a matter of fact, FBI disclosures about the investigation of then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and the famous server gate issue. So stay tuned for that. She shares with us some very interesting information that she's been gleaning from the web. And then, of course, wrapping it up this afternoon was Mitch Kokai, Communications Director of the John Locke Foundation. And we get into a little bit of a humorous coincidence associated with the topic of government transparency. I'll just leave it at that and give you time to consider this in the second hour of Viewpoints this afternoon. As always, you're welcome to join us by phone, 252 area code 247-7282. That's 247-7282. Via email at viewpoints with an S, viewpointsradio@hotmail.com. Via Facebook at Viewpoints on the Talk Station. Of course, do want to thank our sponsors for the afternoon, Advanced Water Systems, the people that bring you Connecticut, folks that are practically reinventing water, and Advanced Office Solutions. And I just want to make mention very quickly about Advanced Office Solutions. As I always remind you, it's a family-owned business committed to making your business successful. But in the process, they also understand the challenges that we face here in coastal North Carolina, particularly in relationship to getting supplies and getting assets to businesses, and in the process getting certain skills to the offices that need, for example, equipment, things of this nature. They are the linear dealer for our area, all linear products and services you can trust to Advanced Office Solutions, but so much more, networking solutions ranging for, well, possibly office leasing equipment, and in some instances, they will even buy out the lease of the equipment. They can help you out from front door to back door. That's Advanced Office Solutions, a locally owned, family-owned business. And if you want to find out more, go to their website, advosi.com. That's advosi.com. Or you can give them a call locally, 393-1112. That's 393-1112. As always, to remind you, integrity, reliability, and affordability. Advanced Office Solutions, a local supplier of linear products. They do business with you the way you want to do business with them. As we prepare to bring Dan Gainor on, I do want to remind you this evening, Balsam Range will be appearing not far from our studio at Glad Tidings. They're just across the street from West Carteret High School. It's a concert, and there are still tickets available. That's Balsam Range this evening, and this is raising money for Alzheimer's. It's a Rotary Club function, and they're looking for a large crowd. I hope to see you there this evening. I want to have one other quick note here, I see from the AP, officials in North Carolina's westernmost county have voted to declare themselves a gun sanctuary county. The Cherokee Scout, it's a newspaper there, I know the folks there, reports that Cherokee County Commissioners voted 3-2 to pass a 3-page resolution that in part says the county will defy efforts by state or federal government to enforce strict gun control laws. I just thought that was an interesting change of pace here in North Carolina. Well, associated with that, and of course, I'm sure we're going to get into this conversation, the events in New Zealand. But before I get to that, as always, a pleasure to welcome Dan Gainor of newsbusters.org. And Dan, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you. And we might as well get it out of the way right away. And this is just, if you support terrorism, there's something wrong with you. If you oppose terrorism, though, you have to oppose terrorism, not be selective about it. You got to say that you're against rockets flying into Israel from the Palestinians aimed at the citizens. You got to say that you're against suicide bombers. You got to hit the whole list, and so many people don't want to do that.
They want to be selective, and by the way, in the process, they like to select it based on the victims. They also like to select it based on the tools used, do they not?
Yeah, it's amazing the number of terrorism acts that actually happens in a given month, and how little the media really care about them, either because the targeted, who gets targeted, right, the weapon used, something like that.
I want to talk about something here in a few minutes. We're going to go to a break before I get into a longer conversation with you, Dan. Dan Gainor of newsbusters.org. Okay, before I go to that break, let me get Gary from Oriental on, because he probably wants to talk about the very thing we're going to be chatting about. Gary, good afternoon. Welcome to the program. Yes, sir.
Hey, Dan. You know something I noticed, and it really bothers me? Every time we turn around, there's some kind of a tragedy. Remember Ruby Ridge, Randy Weaver, white separatists, and now we got this guy in Australia or in New Zealand. He's a right-wing white terrorist, David Koresh, white. And why is everybody so emphasized on the color of these idiots? And why is it that if let's say Randy Weaver was black or an American Indian, they would never ever say that they have a newfangled cool name for it? Why is that?
Good point.
In this particular case, it's partially due to the manifesto. He certainly put on the attitudes and the armor of somebody who believes that way. And so when you believe that way, and then you put out a manifesto, then they're going to treat you that way.
And then
okay,
go ahead.
I got that part. But, even if you look back in time, and obviously this is all related to, white males and guns and everything else, like I said, Ruby Ridge, Randy Weaver, David Koresh, the Branch Davidians. This has been going on every single time that there's anything involved with any kind of a murder. They always have to make sure that you are defined by being like a white separatist, a white nationalist, which is what they call our president. Yes, he is a nationalist, and by the way, he happens to be white because he loves our nation. Why? It's such a taboo now, and what is the motive behind it? Because I'm really lost.
Well, I think the motive is in this particular case, the guys were very clear in stating what their motive was. Their motive is to divide America and cause a civil war.
Right.
That's what they're trying to do. So a lot of these idiots who are citing these people or attacking the Trump people or something like that, they're buying into what this guy wanted.
So well, I'll tell you what, you're touching on an issue I want to get to in a few moments. Gary, thanks for your call. I got to go to a break, but we're going to get back to this conversation in just a moment with Dan Gainor. Dan, when I come back, I want to talk about the role of the internet in all of this. Stay with us here on Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. Joining us this afternoon, Dan Gainor, in preparation for, of course, St. Patrick's Day. I think, Dan, well, you're not misappropriating Irish descent, are you? Dan Gainor with us. Stay with us here on Viewpoints. A little Irish tune for Dan Gainor, who, by the way, has not misappropriated Irish or the Irish culture. Rest of America is, though, I'll tell you that right now. And, Dan, we're just going to have a march for Ireland, recognizing that people are just misappropriating it, drinking too much beer, and particularly green beer. I never knew that they sold green beer in Ireland, but that's a topic for another story. Let's talk about the issue in New Zealand. And I've got a very big question for you, Dan. The role of the internet. And what's really disturbing me, first, is the display, the videoing, the repetitive use of the video that the perpetrator or perpetrators, plural, created and promoted. I'm wondering, there's something really. For one of my description, something is just very wrong here. And I recognize that there's evil out there, evil is done and evil is committed, but it's almost a glorification of it in a paradoxical way. Your thoughts?
Oh, well, the media certainly glory in violence. I mean, they always have. News and entertainment media have both celebrated violence and made it much more realistic and gruesome than it used to be. And so look, I'm going to channel Ross for a second, okay? Because even though he's not here, Ross is a big game player,
right?
And I watched the one video, and I watched it so I could talk about it on radio, talking about the media element of it,
right?
And it's like watching a first-person shooter game, and it's appalling. Because here's somebody goes and shoots people in a room and backs out and reloads and comes back, and yeah, it's just depressing that this is where we are as a society.
We don't have the fortitude. We don't have the I don't know the propriety of recognizing these are things that I don't need to view. I don't want to view. I don't want to. I tell me the story. I've read the story. I understand the story. I'm sympathetic to all of the folks impacted, the whole country of New Zealand, for all that matters. And I don't want to see the video. And I've mentioned this last week in relationship to a situation that happened in our community, an individual committing public suicide, and how people were, sharing the video of the individual as he hung from the bridge. It's something wrong with society, and in the process, and by the way, we're gonna deflect this discussion. I say you, not you and I, but nationally and internationally, we're going to deflect this situation to some simplistic issue: guns, bullets, religion, something of that nature. And I'm more jaundiced about that than ever before. I'm thinking, no, we as a community, and it's a worldwide community, we need to reassess our principles, our character. And I think if we were to do that, it would go a long way towards possibly, ferreting out the evil that exists. It's going to happen. I mean, we've had evil before, and we're going to have evil in the future. But you watch and see. It'll be simplified, will it not?
Well, I certainly think so. And yes, you're right. We've had evil before. We will have evil again. But the media like their narrative, and that's all this is about. This is about creating the proper narrative. So when there's a very interesting thing on Wikipedia. It tracks all of the different terrorist acts in a given month.
Right.
And for the month of March, as of last night, we were already beyond the 90.
And to your point, by the way, I want to make mention of this. You say acts of terror, including sending in missiles to peaceful communities, like as is happening in Israel, right?
Yeah,
I mean, we go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Well, I mean, to your opening comment, it's very easy to be selective about what we consider terrorism, and we've seen this before in the Middle East. We've seen this. I mean, in Syria. Well, my gosh, look at what's happening in China with the Uyghurs. I mean, this is there are terrorist activities there as well. So I'm thinking whatever we can do is, we oversimplify it by making the communication so simple in the process.
Yeah, I just want to get to a point where everybody looks at a crime like we used to. It looks at a crime as it's a bad thing. We're going to look at it the same neutral lens. We don't have that anymore. We've got journalists basically picking and choosing. They use the stories that they use solely to attack Trump. That's it entirely. And if they don't attack Trump, well, they don't care as much. And so stories around the world, I mean, this story took place thousands and thousands of miles from our border.
Right.
But the media want to make it about Trump. It's ridiculous.
So tonight and this weekend, the events in New Zealand are going to be, there's going to be an attachment with Trump on that?
Yeah, we've CNN and other outlets have already tried to blame Trump for the shooting.
Oh, God.
And, you look at that and go, like, what did he have to do? But because that's their agenda, that's what's happening. And expect it to happen again and again and again.
The other aspect of this, and I've got to bring into the topic of the events in Washington, D.C. over the past week as well, again, related to Trump, but also related to religion and, of course, the concerns associated with Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, and the fact that we are seeing a growing divide strictly on the area of religion. And this strikes me as another situation associated with that. Again, they keep pointing out the differences, but there's no effort on the part of the media to see if we can't build bridges. Or am I missing something?
Oh, they don't want to build bridges. They want to tear conservative bridges down and build the liberal bridges up. They want to take conservative bridges and tear them down and replace them with liberal bridges. They've got a very set agenda. We've seen it all throughout this, this scandalous attack. I mean, this is just horrific to watch. Yet, how it's going to play out. The predictable people are going to turn around and blame Trump and all his supporters. Like, oh, you're racist. There's no real evidence of that, but that doesn't matter.
It's okay. You say it, the old adage, you say a lie long enough and often enough, and it becomes the truth. Dan Gainor of newsbusters.org with us this afternoon, and we're chatting about right now the experience the situation in New Zealand. And what's really interesting about this, Dan, when I read it this morning, it was one of those countries where the last thing you'd ever expect is something of this nature. New Zealanders by nature are independent. There's just no. I've never known that there would be any major schism in that country. Apparently there is, or at least there's a buildup. Again, I go back to what role the media is playing in this, but particularly the digital media. I'm just worried that what we're seeing is going to develop copycat events as well.
Well, I mean, again, remember we had a lot of terror attacks.
Yep.
We have terror attacks all the time, and we're not supposed to talk about that. Well, so it's the rest. We don't need a copycat case. We just more terrorism. I mean, that's if you look in the news, notice how little you see about the rockets that were fired at Israel, fired at Tel Aviv.
Right. That's true.
That's where we are right now. The media pick and choose the narrative that they like.
And of course, the greater they keep the pot stirred, the happier they are, all intents and purposes. Am I pretty accurate in that description?
Oh, absolutely. 100% accurate on that description.
Well, in the process, and I have to ask, this is a rhetorical question as much as a serious question. What does the media hope to gain from this? Because in reality, the industry is itself going down the drain, as we're seeing with declining readership in newspapers, especially large daily newspapers, and declining trust and faith in the major TV markets. What is to be gained?
Well, I mean, they're targeting their enemies, and they consider the conservatives to be their enemies. If you saw the interview with the New York Times lawyer, he was listing his villains, and he listed Dana Lash and the NRA.
Right.
I mean, you're supposed to be the lawyer for a neutral newspaper, and you sound like a whack-nut.
Well, okay. I have this, and this really is a Gary's question in some regards. But to what end? What are we gaining other than we've got an enemies list? What are they to go ahead?
What the press wants to do is ban conservative speech, and they're not making any bones about it. Kara Swisher, who's one of the most influential tech people out there, spoke at South by Southwest, which just was last weekend.
Right.
And she mentioned that her son, who's 13 years old, likes to watch Ben Shapiro videos. And then she followed it up, and she was talking to the head of YouTube. She said she'd ban him from YouTube.
Wow.
Ban his videos. This is their worldview. Their worldview is to be censored. That was their reaction today. And look, I understand that a lot of people may not want to watch this video, and I'm fine with that. They may not want to read the manifesto, but I don't want to ban them from the whole world.
But at the same...
Because, I told a friend of mine who's Jewish, who's a little bit more liberal than I am, she said she doesn't understand why people watch it. I said, I watched this video for the same reason I watch Holocaust videos, so I can discuss it intelligently.
All right, I would accept that. But I think that then, and hearing it from you, again, as, quote, a paid professional observer, don't do this at home without appropriate training, I can appreciate that. I'm not interested and I will not bother to watch it. I'm not going to make any effort to. I don't need to. There's no value in it. Yes, reading the manifesto, I'd rather read it than hear it. But on top of that, I would rather read about the story and in the process, hopefully getting a broader experience or exposure to the story from the perspective of not only the perpetrators, but the victims and the community and how they're rallying around this. In other words, I want the whole story. I don't want just I don't want that video game as you were describing it a few moments ago. But I am concerned for a variety of reasons, and one of the things I am concerned about is the potential of copycat efforts in the future. We'll talk about that in a few months. We'll take a quick break here. We're going to get back to the good, the bad, and the ugly with Dan Gainor of newsbusters.org here as we prepare for St. Patrick's Day. And I've got to say that in Dan's case, I know he has Irish heritage. He's not misappropriating it. The rest of you, you're not allowed to wear green on St. Patrick's Day. Stay with us here on Viewpoints. In keeping with the season and the time, that's a little Irish tune for Dan Gainor. He is not misappropriating St. Patrick's Day. The rest of you Anglos, no green on 17. No green on 17. Remember that. All right, we're demanding that. No misappropriation of the Irish heritage. Dan, good afternoon to you. Let's do the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I've got a twist, or I've got a feeling he's got a twist on the good.
Well, here's the twist. There's no good this week. And in fact, I mean, there's just various degrees of bad, and so let's just get to it.
Okay, so much for the good for the week. Now for the bad.
I'm going to give an extra bad since we had no good.
Uh-huh.
The first bad is the media celebrating the GOP's attempt to overturn Trump's move on the wall.
All right.
And oh my God, maybe they'll embarrass Trump. You're not supposed to pick sides. I know this is tough for journalists, but the networks were really bad on this, and CNN worse than everybody else, of course, as usual.
Okay, Dan, what do you mean they're not supposed to pick sides? What universe are you living in? All right, that's one bad. What would be the other bad?
Well, let's go for bad, badder, and baddest.
Okay.
Badder is Beto. Beto-mania has struck. Beto-mania is like Beatlemania, except without the talent or charisma or and he's not British.
All right.
But they're still, the press is obsessed. So it started off really big with this week with the 17-page Vanity Fair profile, including the cover photo of Beto with a pickup truck in Texas. I mean, oh my God. And the media are obsessed because he's the cool rock and roll star they all want to be. Oh my gosh, he performs music. Oh gosh, he likes rock and roll. They're so desperate to have another JFK or RFK so they can resurrect Camelot because all the Kennedys are useless. So they are pounding it. But here's the problem. Poor little Beto, Bobby Frank is one guy I know he calls it. Beto is not all that liberal. And so now they're freaking out about it. He's a white male.
Right. No, this is interesting. It is all this display is in, and I think the name of the magazine is important, Vanity Fair. A little vanity here. All right, you want to do a batter before we do the ugly?
No, we'll just do the ugly.
All right.
It's the bad and batter. Now, it's the baddest will be the ugly.
Okay, now for the ugly.
Well, we're witnessing it right now.
Right.
Media coverage of the terror attack. And again, I can't say this enough because there's so many people looking to pounce on everything everybody says.
Right.
This is a horrific attack. And if you haven't seen the video, trust me, it's more horrific than you can imagine. But as I said, I talked to a friend of mine who doesn't understand why people would see it. I said, I messaged her and I said, the reason why I watched it, the same reason I watch Holocaust videos. Because I need to understand it so I can process it and talk about it.
Exactly.
This is just like watching a video game. A guy moves down a hall and shoots everybody he encounters, steps into a room, shoots right, shoots a whole crowd of people, steps back so he can reload. Somebody comes at him, he kills that guy or shoots that guy, then he shoots another crowd of people. It was, evil. Let's not dance around the word. It was evil.
But you're not going to have anybody mention that. They're going to say he was led to do that by.
They're going to say he was right wing, and they're going to blame Trump.
Right.
He says he doesn't like Trump. He actively posted in his manifesto, and I'm just going by news reports here because I don't want to read it too. That he was trying to set off a civil war. Because he's trying to get liberals to do what liberals will just reflexively do, which is try to ban guns. And he said, well, then that's likely to cause a schism in the United States, and that's what he wants.
Right.
But look, he's a lunatic, and the press turns around and wants to blame Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump is responsible for every ill that goes on in the world.
Again, it's a simplification, oversimplification, if you get right down to it. Dan, before we move on to other items, I'm curious, what will the international press be saying? Do you think they'll be doing it likewise, expressing frustration and anger at Donald Trump?
Of course, because the international press doesn't even understand the American right to bear arms.
Right.
They, by and large, this took place close to Australia, even though New Zealand is a different country. And Australia is one of the countries that recently had a big gun ban, several years ago. And so the press, international press, is mostly in countries that oppose the idea of having gun rights.
Every Wednesday I talk to a friend, former classmate of mine, lives in London, and we were chatting this past Wednesday. I saw several stories on this in Sky News earlier in the week. They're having a terrible problem in London with knife attacks, knife assaults. And they're talking about how can they stop them short of banning kitchen knives and knives used for work, things of this nature. So, what's really fascinating, no one's looking at the human element. They're looking at the inanimate object element. It's the gun that's caused the problem. It's the gun that entices it. It's the knife that causes the problem. It's the gun or the knife that entices you. Now, rockets, to your point a few moments ago, well, those are weapons of war. They really aren't weapons of terrorism. Go figure.
Well, and here I understand the New Zealand story is a story. It's a big story.
Right.
But because 49 people were killed at once, and up to this point, I think the number of New Zealanders who have been killed in murder cases this year was 48. But where is the news coverage of Baltimore?
Right.
Baltimore, I think it's either this week or last week. Baltimore is the front page of the New York Times Magazine about what a failure it is. The number I checked yesterday was 56 murders this year. Now, New Zealand's got a population of a few million. Baltimore has a population of like 600,000 or something. And it's still got 56 murders going so far this year. Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about the other crimes. They say, well, terrorism, look at this right-wing white people thing. Notice how they never pick on overall violence. Because overall violence, then you've got to start calling out other ethnic groups.
And you have to point out to other causes.
You want to live in a safe part of the country.
Yeah.
You want to live near Asian Americans.
Right.
Just according to FBI statistics, Asian Americans are the one major demographic group that disproportionately is less in pretty much every character of crime. Whites are up in a couple, Hispanics in a couple, but African Americans off the charts. Now that certainly reflects poverty and traditional poverty, racism and whatever, but still comes down to if you use the same stats that they're using, they become inconvenient to them when you start digging further into them. And nobody wants to talk about that. Why can't we just say, hey, we have this problem and that problem, the other problem, and not just say and everybody try to grab political points?
Well, and that's really what it's all about. Again, it goes back to that comment. It's that narrative. Before we go to the break, let's go to Ernie in Emerald Isle. Dan Gainor with newsbusters.org with us. Ernie, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm a little off topic with this, but I heard that this guy, Beto O'Rourke, has jumped into the Democrat.
Right.
How many clowns can they fit into that little circus car?
Well, I think they've got 15 now.
Yeah. And my take is on this: if they don't coalesce behind somebody within the next couple of months, for sure, Trump is a shoo-in, unless they can nail Trump for all the crap that they're charging him with. But I think they're committing suicide. Truthfully.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the problem. The Democrats think that they are poised to beat Donald Trump, and so because of that, everybody thinks that if they're the nominee, they'll win. So it's hard to tell people not to run when that's the argument, and at the same time, all these lesser known people. So, I mean, Buttigieg, I think that's how you pronounce his name. The gay mayor in whatever city in Indiana, not Indianapolis, one of the other ones. He wants to run because. Maybe he's making a name for himself, or maybe in some fantasy world he's convinced himself he could win. After Donald Trump won, all bets are off about what the traditional rules are about winning an election.
Good point.
And so everybody thinks, hey, maybe it's my turn to catch lightning in a bottle. But there's so many people trying to grab the bottle that the odds of the bottle breaking and Donald Trump getting reelected, it's certainly strong. But please take this into account. None of this, all of this is background noise until September 2020. Because that's when the things that happen will really register in people's minds and really matter, because you'll have the early voting that will start in October and all that stuff. That's when it really matters. And everything before that is just the opening act.
I know, but the other aspect of this, Ernie, as we go to the break, good question, because really what's happening is I think the candidates are an indication of that particular group, being Democrats, how much disarray their organization and their very membership is. And I mean that
my point exactly. If they don't get their stuff together, they're sunk.
Well, I don't know that they can. Ernie, thanks for the call. Appreciate that. All right. Yes, we're playing Irish music today. And no, we're not misappropriating it. We're doing it on behalf of our guest, Dan Gainor, who has strong Irish roots. Stay with us here. Viewpoints on the Talk Station, FM 107, AM 1240. Again, no green on 17. And that is no misappropriation of St. Patrick's Day unless you are truly Irish. And we're going to be having DNA tests in order. If you're wearing green, we're going to take a DNA test. All right, Dan, let's move to the other topic that generated a lot of controversy over the past week and discussion, the academic scandal, as it's called. I'm a little stunned that everybody's upset over the fact that some families used undue influence as if that's a new thing. They've been doing it for centuries. It's interesting. I give a large amount of money to the library or to some other facility, and gee gosh, my children somehow get into that institution. Well, be that as it is, does this story have anything of significance behind it?
Well, I mean, it's a Schadenfreude story, and we all love those. We all hate the rich, and so watching rich people, watching an Oscar winner go to jail, Felicity Upton, and not doing it for research. Watching, Lori Loughlin, a lot of people like Lori Loughlin, but having her career destroyed because she was doing stuff for the Hallmark Channel, and turns out that she was also doing stuff for, the Crime Channel or whatever. Apparently, that people want to revel in that. The best part about this is there's still a lot of names that might drop. Apparently, the 757 families, not 50 families involved in this. Wow. So if it turns out there's a lot more Hollywood people, I think, a lot of people will see that as a good thing. But look, I understand parents wanting to help their kids.
Right.
So the idea of parents edging one thing, hedging things, this way or that way, but flat out fraud, bribery, and here's the best part: some of them then turned around and wrote it off on their taxes.
Ooh.
So this is one of those funny stories. So I could actually make a funny point, and that is, if you remember, there were two big Hollywood celebs, pretty solid popularities, Hollywood celebs, who got into tax problems: Wesley Snipes and Nicolas Cage.
Right. Yes.
But they apparently had very different representation. Because Wesley Snipes went to federal penitentiary. I mean, he went to the big house, serious prison for his tax problems. And Nicolas Cage went to Hollywood and made a whole lot of mediocre movies, a couple of them good. Knowing is good. Even the Magician's Apprentice was decent. But still, he just basically made whatever movies apparently crossed his desk. And I'm guessing that the deal he cut, or his agent cut, or his lawyer, or some combination of those, cut with the IRS was, oh, well, you don't want to send me to prison. I will give you so much money that they will more than compensate. Is it, well, how much money are we talking about? How much money do you want? Because I'll do the next, you want me to do, I'll do 20 movies in 4 years or something if you want me to. And apparently whatever he did worked. And so if I were one of the people involved, I would have certainly had my attorney contact Nicolas Cage. Like, okay, how did you keep the IRS away? Because this is something all of us live in fear of the IRS.
Yes.
I mean, everybody does.
Yeah.
I just paid my taxes, took care of things through an accountant.
Just for that,
I want to have somebody with me if I ever called to in front of the IRS.
You've got it. Dan Gainor of newsbusters.org. Go to that website on a daily basis. And, you've got a variety. We didn't even get to this. CBS and NBC cheer student climate strike. We'll find out next Monday how many of our students here in our region went on strike today. Dan, as always, thanks for being with us. And by the way, happy St. Patrick's Day to you, sir.
Sounds good.